Do any of you guys out there have that friend that you go out for dinner with and you tell your partner at home you had a salad when really you went out and ate junk food? One of those really bad influence friends? I feel like we are that friend for each other. I can't fit in my Christmas jeans and I still ask myself why. Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another spooky episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. I just got my nails done, so I'm going to be very handsy in this episode. If you like all things true crime, UFO, supernatural, conspiracy theory and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you every Friday with our true crime killer weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays, where we'll discuss something spooky I've heard. I will leave a small disclaimer. This case involves details of violent crime and crimes against children. If that's a trigger point for you, then please feel free to turn away now. It's a final countdown. Do-do-do-do. It's almost Santa time, and whilst most of the general public are out there getting their last minute bits and pieces and also ice skating with their significant others, here we are at home talking about murder. Freaks, are you organised? I'm not. My usual Christmas routine is sitting at 4 a.m, wrapping my last minute presents, swimming in anxiety. But whatever your Christmas plans at this 25th of December, I hope you will all take time to appreciate your loved ones and also think of those who are missing a family member from around the table this year. Families like that of Jonelle Matthews. I've wanted to cover this case for such a long time, and I mean ages since I started this channel, but it never really felt like the right moment because for a long time Jonelle was missing, and like most of you out there, I kind of hoped that she would turn up one day with an explanation, but sadly in 2020 everything changed. So tonight, everyone, we will be discussing the kidnap and murder of Jonelle Matthews. It was a frosty morning in Greeley, Colorado, and like most winter mornings, the ground outside was thick with snow. In fact, the area is so well known for its plummeting temperatures that on the Welcome to Greeley sign, there's also a little side note that says the exact opposite of Hawaii. With the stunning backdrop of the snowy mountains, this area looks like the perfect place to raise a family. Residents host bake sales, they chat to their neighbours, they go to church, they don't murder each other. But sadly, in 1984, one resident never got that memo.
Your pizza, my love.
I got pizza delivered, thank you. Oh, I'm never going to fit into my wedding dress. The day of the 20th of December 1984 was a hectic one in the home of 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews. The Matthews family had just had a really bad bout of the winter flu in their house, and Jonelle was finally starting to feel better. Unfortunately though, Jonelle's illness wasn't the only one to have plagued the family. Her grandmother had fallen ill, and her mother Gloria was travelling to California that night to be at her bedside. So on that evening, Gloria Matthews packed her suitcase and off she went to California, a choice that would forever haunt her. Amongst all the packed suitcases and the wrapped Christmas gifts, Jonelle and her little raspy voice was practicing for her school choir show. Jonelle had been lucky enough to be handpicked to sing in her school's Christmas service, something she'd been practicing for months. But that wasn't the only family event happening that night. No. Jonelle's 16-year-old sister Jennifer was also playing in her high school basketball game. It was decided that with Gloria now travelling to California to see her mother, Jim Matthews, Jonelle's father, would attend Jennifer's basketball game, and Jonelle was to organise a ride back from her school to her home. It was a different time. For a moment there, Jonelle wasn't going to be able to even perform in her Christmas concert. Her mother Gloria had had recommended that she stay home and rest because she was just getting over this flu. But Jonelle had to go into school that day. She had made handmade gifts for her friends, and it was the last day of Christmas break before they all went off for their holidays. Reminds me of the good old days when I'd run into primary school handing out my cards to all of my 2 friends. I'd also put an extra kiss on the card of that boy who picked his nose constantly, but I was sure we were soulmates. Probably still picking his nose. But it was because of this young desperation to go in and see her friends that Jonelle's parents relented and allowed her to go to school. Gloria gave her daughter a kiss goodbye as she left for the airport, not knowing this would be the last time she would ever see Jonelle alive. As the school day came and went, Jonelle and her friends met at the local bank for the Christmas concert, and because she'd been awarded a solo for this event, she took her place front and centre. She was ready to shine and she was going to smash it. This brings back the most wholesome memories for me. Literally, I was so obsessed with singing in my school Christmas show that I would only drink hot drinks for 2 weeks before. And when it came to showtime, honey, I thought I was Whitney Houston up there. I would use my little skinny Gollum elbows to push my way to the front because I wanted to be seen. But unlike me, Jonelle had actual talent, and many people watching her that night said she gave a beautiful performance. When the children arrived back at the school, Jonelle realised she had to sort herself a lift home, so she asked her friend Deanna Ross if her father Russell would drive her home, and like most gentlemanly fathers, Russell reluctantly relented. I feel that's a rite of passage for any preteen out there. You know, you used to run up to your mum's car and be like, "Mum, can you take me and my 15 friends home?" As Jonelle pulled up to her family home at around 8:15 p.m. that night, Deanna's father, Russell, noticed that the garage door was partially opened. This wasn't really raising any alarms for Jonelle, however, because Jim Matthews, her father, would always work in the garage on his days off. So thinking nothing of it, a happy Jonelle bounced out of the car and made her way down the driveway. As she entered her home, she gave Russell and Deanna her safety signal of flicking the lights on and off in the living room. But knowing what I know now, you may find yourself wondering if her killer was watching this safety signal the whole time. Jonelle's movements when she was inside the home were pretty standard for your normal preteen. She first of all kicked off her tights. I think we can all agree out there, ladies, men, whoever likes to wear tights, that kicking off those tights after a long day is just the best feeling in the world. The little girl then grabbed her portable space heater, moving it closer to the couch and her favourite pillow, and settled in front of the TV. Jonelle was the youngest in the family, so she rarely got control of the remote, so she thought she would take full advantage whilst her family were away. Just as Jonelle sat down, so typical, the phone rang at 8:33 p.m. It was one of Jim Matthews' employees. He was actually the headmaster of the Platte Valley Elementary School, and it was one of his female teachers calling in sick for the next day. Jonelle explained that she was home alone and her dad wasn't there, but that she would take a message and have him call her back. Jonelle hung up the phone, and what happened after that would remain a mystery for 36 years. At 9:30 p.m, Jim Matthews arrived back from Jennifer's basketball game. When he did, he noticed that the garage door was slightly more opened than what he thought he had left it. He remembered only leaving it slightly ajar, but it was literally half open now. He never thought much of it and walked into the home, calling out Jonelle's name. When she didn't answer, he just assumed that as most of her friends lived locally, she'd perhaps gone out to see one of them. Figuring Jonelle would be home soon, Jim took it upon himself to start wrapping some of his daughter's Christmas presents. However, when his daughter Jennifer arrives home at 10 p.m. and she hasn't seen Jonelle or heard from her, he does become slightly concerned. He calls his pastor and best friend James Christie to ask him, is it too overdramatic to call local police? James says not at all and tells his friend to call local law enforcement, which he does at 10:15 p.m. Law enforcement arrive within 15 minutes of being called, so well done Greeley Police doing the bare minimum. But they initially do believe that it could be a case of a preteen runaway. However, they stop thinking that when they find something bizarre. Footprints in the snow. Men's footprints. It was clear to officers that someone had tried to disguise these footprints by raking them over with a rake found in the Matthews garage. Did this mean that someone was watching Jonelle from outside the house? At around midnight, Gloria Matthews called her family home to let them know she'd arrived in California safely. Unfortunately, she was met with the news that her daughter had gone missing and literally had to hop straight on another flight back to Greeley. What would be law enforcement's next move? They had this young girl who had clearly gone out wearing her slippers and a light winter jacket. With these plummeting temperatures outside at night, they knew they had to move fast. But first, they had to get to know the Matthews family. Jonelle Matthews was born on February 9th, 1972, but Jim and Gloria were not her biological parents. Jonelle was born in California as a result of an unwanted teenage pregnancy by her then 13-year-old mother, Terry Vieira Martinez. Despite her young age and difficult circumstances, Terry did the best thing for her child and reached out for a closed adoption. Enter Jim and Gloria Matthews. Jim and Gloria already had a daughter of their own, little 3-year-old Jennifer, but they had been trying for their second child with absolutely no luck. So when the couple heard about adopting through the Children's Home Society of California, they felt like it was a sign from God, and they fell in love with Jonelle the moment they met her. Here they had this tiny baby with the biggest brown eyes, but she was extremely different personality-wise to that of her sibling. She was fiercely independent, she was opinionated, and a free thinker. Wise beyond her years, Jonelle was raised in a strong Christian household, and unlike most children, she actually thrived at school when she was attending Franklin Middle School. She lived for her friends, so she was happy to go to school as long as she could socialise. Jonelle's parents had always been open and honest with her about her roots, and from the age that she could ask, Jonelle knew that she was adopted. An inquisitive little thing, she would always express a longing to meet the woman who gave her away. Sadly, Jonelle would never meet her birth mother. Investigators had to take Jonelle's complex family history into consideration in her case, and they thought there was a small chance that Terry had found out where Jonelle was living and kidnapped her in a bid to have a second chance at motherhood. Because of these fears, they decided to tail Terry without her knowledge in the hopes that she would slip up and be seen travelling with a small child. But after a few months of surveillance, they realised that not only did Terry not have Jonelle, Terry had no clue that Jonelle was missing. In fact, Terry was so left in the dark that she didn't find out that Jonelle was missing until 1996, 12 years later, when she contacted Jim and Gloria to see if she could have a reunion with her daughter. When she found out, this must have been devastating for her, I'm sure, but on a silver lining note, the family became extremely close to Terry and they helped each other through that difficult time. But investigators weren't quite finished with their theory about a family connection, and they soon turned their eye on Jim Matthews. Jim was extremely cooperative with police. Never once did he get a lawyer or answer no comment. He even opted to have a polygraph taken by the FBI. He persisted that he arrived home at 9:30 p.m. and Jonelle wasn't home. His story never changed, not one detail. But there was no proof. I mean, who knows? Jonelle's friend Deanna and her father strictly say that they dropped Jonelle off safe and sound at 8:30 p.m. Or did they? Because several armchair detectives and Reddit sleuths have a theory about Russell and believe that he's not as innocent as he may seem. I do agree, seems suspicious, last one to see her alive, and also when Jonelle went missing, Russell did insert himself into the investigation, being very helpful with handing out flyers and in the search. But was this just a good neighbour? Or was he hiding something? Russell would later be ruled out by local police through his alibi, which is sketchy at best because his alibi came from his 2 young children who stated that Daddy came straight home. The public opinion, however, wouldn't be so quick to change, and for years, both Jim Matthews and Russell Ross were under a cloud of suspicion. At first, news coverage on Jonelle's case was fairly local. It was far from front page news. That was until a speech that came from then President Ronald Reagan. In March 1985, Ronald Reagan mentioned Jonelle's case specifically whilst advocating for missing and exploited children. But now with the mass media coverage comes the bitter side of that, the false leads, the fabricated statements. One of them coming from a local man who only lived 2 miles from the Matthews home. This man called into law enforcement 14 times in the time between 1984 and 1992. He claimed to have had an alleged conversation with his father-in-law about Jonelle's disappearance. He said that it was a murder organised by the church. But why? The man claimed that this was meant to be a racist message sent by someone who was within the Greeley Police Department themselves. Now, if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that police are partial to a touch of violence, but a calculated hit like this in Greeley, Colorado seems a bit far-fetched. For years, the Matthews family awaited a phone call that never came. Every Christmas tinged with sadness. Why their daughter? Why at Christmas time? The unanswered questions and the whisperings and funny looks from neighbours soon became too much to bear for the Matthews family, and they decided, after declaring their daughter legally dead in 1994, that they needed a fresh start. They moved out of Greeley, eventually settling in Costa Rica. Like Jonelle's family and friends, the residents of Greeley could not forget about her, and also they were still worrying that this monster was out on their streets, prowling for a new victim. For such a long time, many of us believed we would never know anything more about the disappearance of Jonelle Matthews, and that was the case until July 23rd, 2019, when construction workers discovered something that would haunt them forever. The skeletal remains of the 12-year-old little choir singer were found in a ditch southeast of Greeley, only 26 minutes away from her home. Not much could be determined because of the condition of the remains, but one thing was very clear: a bullet wound in the left side of Jonelle's skull. Unfortunately, there was no bullets or shell casings there to be tested. It was believed that the bullet had entered Jonelle's skull and exited through the back. Upon hearing about Jonelle's death, her family were understandably devastated. Jim Matthews had said for such a long time he always knew it would end in tragedy. Due to the time that had passed, 35 years to be exact, there was no viable DNA found at the scene. So then investigators had a burning question on their minds. Who would do this? Who would murder a 12-year-old little girl in cold blood? Well, in 2019, Friday the 13th, it seemed like law enforcement may finally have that answer. Who could it be? Was it Jim Matthews, Jonelle's father? Or possibly Russell Ross, the nice guy who dropped her off and was the last one to see her alive? Or maybe it could have been that mysterious teacher who phoned to call in sick, who knew Jonelle was home alone. None of the above. It was 68-year-old Stephen Pankey, a former youth pastor. I'm saying nothing. So who's Steve Pankey? Well, if you hold on to your knickers there, I'll tell you. Stephen Dana Pankey was born in Ventura, California, 1951, to his mother Ruth and his father Dana Pankey. Both of his parents were ministers, and he grew up in a highly religious household. It was said that his father father was quite a cold man and focused more on his religious subjects than his wife and children at home. Whilst attending La Puente High School, Stephen would claim that he was attacked by other fellow students for being bisexual, something his parents did not support. So he was being attacked at school and rejected there, and then coming home and feeling rejected by his father, which often left him doing things and scrambling for his father's attention. Stephen would allege that because his parents were the least understanding Christians of our time, he decided to join the US military. He felt like at the time nothing would straighten him out more than surrounding himself with a bunch of henchmen. But clearly that didn't work for Stephen, because he was discharged within 1 year, allegedly because of his homosexuality. After his dismissal from the army, Stephen said that was the final blow that he needed to leave the gay lifestyle, and he was cured. It doesn't work like that, Stephen. After yet another perceived rejection, Stephen was hungry for acceptance and authority, but he couldn't join the police with this dismissal on his record, so what's the next best thing? Security guard. And boy, didn't he wear that plastic fake badge with pride. Steve, the job's worth, would often stop random people in the street and ask them to put their hands up. Freeze! I have absolutely no authority whatsoever. On one particular occasion, whilst handing out his daily dose of justice, Steve maced 2 teenage boys, and he said he was acting in self-defence, but his employer didn't really buy that and he was let go. After this, he was very intrigued by law enforcement and the criminal justice system, so he began taking classes in criminal justice at Ames Community College. His education in this field makes his future criminal activity so baffling. In 1977, Stephen Pankey was accused of sexually assaulting a young woman, a piano player for his church. Now, the woman actually fell pregnant from the assault, and Steve, being the absolute festering jobby that he is, decided to take this as a get out of jail free card and blackmail the woman. She had terminated the pregnancy, and Stephen said that if she didn't drop the charges, he would tell their church and her heavily religious parents of what she had done. Assuming she would be ostracised from her community, she dropped the charges, and you would think that that would be everything done. He's got away with it, tied it up in a clean bow, moving on. But no, Stephen Pankey then decided to sue his victim for defamation of character. Regardless of what happens later on, this man is a monster. Ain't nobody got time for that. Well, somebody did, because in 1978, Stephen was married to his wife, Angela Hicks. But would married life settle young Steve down? No. No, it would not. And his neighbours often saw strange behaviour. In the summer, he would be sitting out on the lawn. In the winter, his curtains would be twitching, watching all the young girls walk home at 3 p.m. from Greeley Middle School, the school that Jonelle attended. Side note, we actually used to have an old man in my old street that used to sit on a chair every Halloween and watch all the kids go by, and I used to think it was so wholesome, so sad. Maybe he's alone, maybe he doesn't have any family, but now I'm just thinking maybe he's a sexual offender. 6 months after macing the 2 teenage boys as a security guard, Steve was yet again accused of harassment. A trailer park owner said that Steve would constantly phone him, either heavily breathing or he would just hang up. In the April of 1984, only 8 months before the murder of Jonelle Matthews, Steve was allegedly harassing members of his own family. Female members of his own family. His aunt would claim that he would follow her in his car and swerve towards her as if he was going to run her off the road. Not only that, another female family member said that as her parents had allowed him to stay in their house as a young boy, he had several times tried to sexually assault her. What is possibly the most terrifying detail in these accusations is that whilst receiving several several heavy breathing phone calls, 58 to be exact. These would eventually be traced back to the Weld Mental Health Centre, where Stephen Pankey was then receiving treatment, literally in therapy for his issues, and he's calling women he's abused. When Steve left the centre, he arrived back home to his wife Angela and his two sons, Mark and Carl, a home that was only a 3-minute drive away from Jonelle Matthews' house. So I know what you're thinking. Yes, they lived nearby, but that's quite a loose connection. If you wait a minute, I'll tell you some more. At the time of Jonelle's disappearance, Stephen Pankey was acting quite strange. Remember, we had spoken about the mysterious phone calls, talking about a police cover-up, someone who kept inserting themselves into the investigation 14 times to be exact? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Stephen Pankey. But that wasn't all. Steve was also bringing home his weirdness to his wife Angela, his now ex-wife Angela. Can't imagine why. She said the day after Jonelle's disappearance, Stephen was packing all of the kids' clothes into duffel bags and said they were going on a trip to Big Bear in California. When she asked who was looking after the dogs on this impromptu trip, Steve said the dogs are gone. The dogs have been dumped. And we still don't know what that means. However strange that may be, it wasn't the oddest thing to happen on the trip. You see, Steve became very interested in Jonelle's case right away, even having his wife allegedly read the story about Jonelle's disappearance in the local newspaper aloud to him at the breakfast table. Angela claimed that he would go through phases of wanting to talk about the case all the time, and then days where he would ban TV and the newspaper from even the mention of Jonelle's name. Upon their return to Greeley after Christmas, the bags were barely on the floor of their home when Stephen ran out the back door and began digging ferociously in their garden like a dog. At the time, Angela said that this wasn't really red flags for her, but over time there would be things that she couldn't ignore. Her husband claimed still to this day to have never known the Matthews family, but he definitely knew people that they were friends with, because up until 1978 he had been a member of the Sunnyview Nazarene Church, the church ran by Jim Matthews' best friend and pastor, James Christie. In fact, when James found out that Stephen had allegedly assaulted one of his church members, he kicked him out, leaving Stephen furious. He was even more irritated when a new family joined the church only 1 month later. That family was the Matthews. But hey, killing a stranger's child to get back at your local church seems a bit extreme, but would you think it was that extreme if I told you there was yet another connection to the Matthews family? Stephen also knew Russell Ross, the man who had dropped Jonelle off that night. They had a very bitter relationship after Russell was promoted as his boss working for 7up, and Stephen didn't like this one little bit. They actually ended up getting into a legal battle in which Stephen Pankey was then fired. Stephen forever resented Russell for his inability to get a successful job after this. We already know that Stephen Pankey was partial to a little bit of stalking and harassing when he didn't get along with someone. Is it possible that that night that Russell dropped off Jonelle, Steve was following them the whole time? I mean, it's the perfect crime. No one would suspect him, and if they ever did find Jonelle, they'd probably just go knocking on Russell's door. And no one thought of Stephen Pankey in this crime until in 1999, his wife Angela Hicks' guilt came too much. Angela Hicks went to local law enforcement saying that for years she had been emotionally and physically abused by her husband Stephen Pankey. She even began taking note of all the little strange things that he would do since the disappearance, and in that little black notebook was pages and pages of circumstantial evidence. During the investigation, law enforcement kept several details of the case under wraps, out of the prying eyes of the public public and local press. They did this because they thought if they caught the killer, they could perhaps catch he or she in a lie. One of these details was the footprints in the snow outside Jonelle's living room window. But lo and behold, what do you know? Inside Angela's little black book would be a newspaper article which Stephen Pankey had handwritten a note on it saying, "Cover up footprints in snow." How did you know that one, Steve? Unless you were the one staring in at Jonelle that night. Investigators knew at this point there was too many coincidences. Steve Pankey was their guy. But without a body and any physical evidence, the case went cold. Stephen Pankey would go on to live his life as usual. He eventually moved to Idaho, wrote a book called Graveyard, and also ran for governor of Idaho in 2014 and 2016. Obviously, he never won because, our government would never allow a sex offender to be a politician. But Steve Pankey's strange and unusual comments would live on forever, and on one occasion during a church service where a minister said he was sure Jonelle would return home safely to her family as it was God's will, Steve Pankey muttered under his breath, "False prophet." But the only question I have for you, Steve, is how do you know the minister wasn't telling the truth? Did you kill Jonelle yourself? Over the years, Stephen Pankey would contact Greeley police with inside knowledge of Jonelle's crime, but none of the leads ever panned out, and Greeley police felt like he was just doing it for attention. In 2018, sadly, Angela Hicks and Stephen Pankey lost their son to a homicide. And allegedly, when Steve Pankey was at his son's casket, he was sobbing, inconsolable, and said the words, "Lord, is this because of Jonelle Matthews?" Did Stephen believe that his son's murder was an act of divine intervention for him killing Jonelle all those years ago? So we have a body, we have all this circumstantial evidence. What now? Well, on the 12th of October 2020, Stephen Pankey was arrested and charged with the murder and kidnap of Jonelle. But the case was far from over. The best word I can use to describe this trial that happened in 2021 this year is a circus. Between Anthony Viorst, Stephen Pankey's aggressive and no-nonsense defence attorney who would allegedly harass witnesses by texting them and calling them non-stop. Then we had Stephen Pankey's younger sister who was a character witness for her brother. Unfortunately, it came to light during the trial that Stephen Pankey couldn't even name or tell the jury the genders of her children. Angela Hicks, Stephen Pankey's now ex-wife, took the stand and shed even more light on her relationship with the alleged killer. She claimed that around the time of Jonelle's murder, Stephen Pankey drove their orange-red car out to a field and set it alight. Why would he do that though? Is it possibly because Jonelle's friend, who she sang in the choir with that night, said that she and Jonelle had noticed an orange to red car following them back from the bank? Is that possible that it was Steve Pankey stalking Jonelle? Pankey's eldest son would go against his mother's statement, however, and say that his father never owned an orange to red car, despite the fact that several locals in Greeley said they definitely saw him driving one in 1984. Yes, there was no DNA evidence to speak of during the trial, and I'm sure we're all sitting here thinking, but if not Stephen Pankey, then who? Well, Stephen's attorney, Anthony Viorst, had his own opinion on that one. A young man named Norris Drake was visiting his mother on the night of December 20th, 1984. His mother lived directly across the road from the Matthews family. Now, it was stated during the trial that several female friends of Drake had heard him talking about young girls in an inappropriate manner, saying things like he loved virgins and that Jonelle herself was well developed for her age. In 1989, Norris's mother stated that her son hadn't left her home until around 9:30 p.m. She knew this because they were watching The Cosby Show from 7 till 9 p.m. Oh, the irony. If Norris was the perpetrator in this case, it is a really slim timeline. You're talking about the time he leaves his mother's at 9 p.m. to the time that Jim Matthews arrives back home at 9:30 p.m. But we are relying on the witness testimony of his mother, so there's that. Unfortunately, Norris Drake couldn't be questioned himself during the trial as he had previously passed away. This case, for lack of a better word, was a mess. There was conflicting statements flying around, no real DNA or physical evidence connecting Stephen Pankey to this case, and for that reason, the jury could not make a decision, and that resulted in a hung jury, and the judge decided to name it a mistrial. Stephen Pankey was once again a free man, aside from a small misdemeanor charge for making a false statement. Here we were so close after all those years, and now we're right back at the beginning again. And without any real physical or DNA evidence, it seems like we may be waiting another while longer before we find out who killed Jonelle. Do you have your theories at home? Do you think it was Stephen Pankey with all his circumstantial evidence? Or perhaps new mystery suspect Norris Drake, who literally was right across the street? Or possibly a wild card, Russell Ross, the man who dropped Jonelle off and said she got home safely. The truth of the matter is, we don't know, and I hope that someday we will. But until then, I guess that's a secret kept between Jonelle and her killer. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up for me. It really helps my channel. If you've managed to watch this entire video and it's your first time, please hit that subscribe button and I'll be here for you every weekend. If you want to keep up with me over the Christmas period, then please feel free to follow me. Not in a stalkery, harassy way like someone with the initials SP. On Instagram at Megan True Crime. I cannot believe that I started this little channel a year ago. It doesn't seem like a year, it's flown by, and I'm sure part of that is because of all of you guys. Each week I tune in and you've left your amazing comments, you've liked my video, and I hope you know it doesn't go unnoticed. Every single comment gets read, and I still feel so blessed to be able to do this 12 months down the line. I will be back for one more episode before the Christmas period. It'll be like a little Christmas special, so I hope you'll tune in. I love you all so much, so please lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and also don't harass your female family members. Just leave them alone. Leave them alone. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a negative COVID test. Huh? You like that? Oh, by the way, I've not even showed you my jumper yet. Who even am I this week? Look, it says Sledgendary. Oh yeah. On that note, you're probably reading this backwards and wondering, why does Megan flip her videos? Someone asked me that last week. The reason is my jaw kind of goes to like one side, and if I flip the video, it doesn't look as noticeable. It's just a weird vanity thing, but in case you think you're watching a bootleg version of Megan True Crime, it's fine. I'm just really vain. See ya! I really can't stay. Oh, forgot that song's a wee bit inappropriate. My hand's like huge. Bye.